I shouldn't have knocked. I knew it the second the door opened and she was standing there, hair slightly damp, sweater hanging loose like she just pulled it on in a hurry. She didn't smile. She didn't frown either. Just looked at me. Your husband said you needed help with the shelves, I said, holding up my tool bag like proof I had a reason to be there. Her eyes flicked to the bag, then back to me. He's not home. That pause, too long to be polite, too short to be a real warning, made my chest tighten. I stepped inside anyway. Her house smelled faintly of coffee and cedar. The living room was warm, sunlight spilling across the carpet in thin, angled stripes. She followed me in, slow, almost cautious, like she wasn't sure if she should be leading me or letting me figure my own way. The shelves were against the far wall, half assembled. A box of screws lay open on the floor, the instruction sheet folded neatly on the arm of the couch. You've done most of it already, I said, kneeling down. Could have finished without me. She didn't answer. Just crossed her arms and leaned against the wall. Watching. I tried to focus on the work, fitting the brackets, tightening bolts, but her silence was louder than the click of the screwdriver. Every so often, I'd glance up and catch her looking not at the shelves, but at me. Her hair brushed her cheek as she tilted her head. You shouldn't be here. I set the screwdriver down, slower than I needed to. Then why'd you let me in? Her mouth twitched, like she was about to say something, then she pushed away from the wall and walked toward the kitchen. Want coffee? Sure. I stayed kneeling, pretending to measure the next panel, but my ears strained for the sound of her in the kitchen, the clink of a spoon, the hum of the machine. She didn't rush. When she came back, she handed me a mug. Her fingers brushed mine, not an accident, but not quite intentional either. The heat from the coffee seemed colder than her skin. Thanks, I murmured. She sat down on the couch, crossing one leg over the other, the sweater slipping slightly off her shoulder. So, she said, how long have you been fixing things? Couple of years. Mostly part-time. I took a sip, the coffee bitter and strong. This isn't really what I want to do. What do you want to do? Her voice was softer now, curious in a way that felt dangerous. I shrugged, set the mug down. Not sure yet. Just something that matters. Her gaze lingered on me, long enough to make my pulse stutter. And you think this doesn't matter? I looked at the half-finished shelves. Not compared to the right thing. For a moment neither of us spoke. The clock ticked in the hallway. Sunlight shifted, moving across her bare ankle. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. You're different, she said, almost to herself. I smiled faintly. Different good or different bad? She didn't answer. Just stood, walked past me, and picked up the last panel for the shelves. Hold this, she said. I took it from her, our fingers touching again, longer this time. She didn't pull away. When the last bolt tightened, I stepped back. The shelves stood perfectly straight. She stood closer than she needed to, the faint scent of her shampoo filling the space between us. I could feel her looking at me again. Her voice was low. You shouldn't be here. I met her eyes. Then tell me to leave. She didn't. The clock ticked again. Then, she reached for the coffee table, but her hand stopped midair. Her fingertips grazed the back of mine. Neither of us moved. I didn't move. Not when her fingers grazed mine. Not when she stepped just slightly closer. The shelves behind us stood perfectly, like a job finished, but the air between us felt anything but done. You said your husband called me, I murmured. But you're here alone. She didn't flinch. He's out of town. Won't be back until Sunday. Her voice was calm, but her eyes gave away more than she wanted. that little flicker of something. Not guilt. Not fear. Just knowing. That why I shouldn't be here. She leaned back against the wall, folding her arms, sweater slipping further down her shoulder. Among other reasons. I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. There was nothing funny about how the room seemed smaller now. Her mug sat on the coffee table, a ring of dark liquid drying on the wood. I noticed her hands, long fingers, nails short, no polish, and wondered if she always kept them like that, or if she just hadn't cared enough lately. You look tired, I said before I could stop myself. She tilted her head, the corner of her mouth twitching. That's a nice way of saying I look bad. That's not what I meant. She didn't reply. Instead, she walked to the kitchen again, and I watched the way she moved, slow but deliberate, like she didn't waste steps. My eyes caught the faint crease at the back of her knee when she turned. I hated how I noticed things like that. When she came back, she sat closer to me than before. Not close enough to touch, but enough that I could feel the heat from her leg. "Why'd you really come?" she asked. I looked at her, but she didn't look away. "Because you asked me to," I said. I didn't ask. The truth was, she was right. It had been her husband who called me yesterday, and I had almost said no. Almost. She shifted, her sweater slipping completely off one shoulder now, revealing the strap of a faded tank top underneath. She didn't pull it back up. "Do you like working for him?" she asked. I let out a short breath. "He's fine." "That's not an answer." I hesitated. "I don't think about him when I'm here." That silence between us stretched again, heavy, unspoken. My pulse thudded in my ears. She looked away first, glancing at the shelves. "You did a good job," she said, almost too casually. "Better than he would have done." Her voice softened. "Stay a while. Have another coffee." I should have said no. But when her hand reached over and brushed my forearm, I didn't move away. Her touch was light, barely there, but my skin burned under it. "I shouldn't." I started but stopped. Her eyes lifted to mine. "Then don't finish that sentence." The clock ticked in the hallway. I didn't finish it. I stayed. I told myself it was just coffee, just being polite. But the second cup sat untouched in front of me, steam fading, while she curled her legs under herself on the couch, sweater hanging loose. We talked, or maybe I talked too much. She asked small things about my family, my work, the kind of questions that sound casual but sink under your skin. I noticed she never mentioned her husband unless I did. At one point, she laughed at something I said, and the sound startled me. It wasn't loud, it was softer, like she hadn't heard herself laugh in a while. That's when I almost told her. Not everything, just that I thought about her more than I should. But the words stuck in my throat. She reached to pour herself more coffee, and her hand brushed my knee. Neither of us said anything. I felt my chest tighten, not from the touch itself, but from how easily it could have been more. Then her phone buzzed. She leaned forward to grab it, glanced at the screen, and frowned. "It's him," she said under her breath, almost like she'd forgotten I could hear. "You gonna answer?" She hesitated, then shook her head and set the phone face down. "Not right now." The air changed. My pulse kicked up, knowing that choice meant something. I tried to focus on my coffee, but I kept catching little details, the faint crease between her brows, the way she bit the inside of her lip while listening to me. I wanted to stop noticing. I couldn't. "Does he trust you?" I asked quietly, surprising even myself. She looked at me for a long moment. "Enough to leave me here with you." Her words should have been a warning, but instead they felt like an invitation. A knock at the door broke the moment. She froze, eyes flicking toward the sound. Probably a neighbor, she murmured but didn't move. The knock came again, louder this time. Want me to get it? I asked. She shook her head quickly. No. Just stay here. She stood, adjusting her sweater, and walked to the door. From the couch, I couldn't see who it was. I just heard her voice, quieter than before, polite but clipped. When she came back, she didn't explain. Just sat down, closer than before, and let out a slow breath. Everything okay? I asked. She nodded, though her eyes said otherwise. It's fine. Her hand rested on the couch cushion between us. Close enough that if I shifted just an inch, I'd be touching her. I told myself to lean back, to make space, to stop this before it turned into something I couldn't take back. But I didn't move. Her gaze lifted, meeting mine, steady and unblinking. The clock ticked once, sharp in the quiet. And for a second, I thought she might close the gap herself. She didn't close the gap, but she didn't look away either. That silence was the worst part. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and not knowing if the ground would hold or crumble. I cleared my throat, sat back just enough to pretend I wasn't thinking about it. So, you're really not gonna answer him? Her jaw tightened. If I answer, he'll think everything's fine. And it's not. Her eyes stayed locked on mine. Would you believe me if I said no? I didn't know if it was the question or the way she asked it, but I forgot how to breathe for a second. I'd believe you, I said quietly. Her lips pressed together, not quite a smile, not quite anything else. She reached for her coffee but didn't drink it, just held the mug like it might warm something more than her hands. I don't usually let people in, she said, her voice low. Not even friends. Definitely not anyone who works for him. Then why me? Her eyes flicked over my face, searching for something. Maybe because you don't look at me the way he does. Or maybe because you do, but you're not pretending it's something else. The words hit harder than I expected. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I think about you, I admitted before I could stop myself. Her fingers tightened around the mug. You shouldn't. I know. For a moment, we just stared at each other, like we were both waiting for the other to take the step we couldn't. Then she set the mug down and leaned forward, elbows on her knees, her face close enough that I could smell the faint sweetness of her shampoo. Tell me what you'd do if I said yes, she murmured. I swallowed hard. To what? To whatever you've been thinking since you walked in my door. Every muscle in my body felt strung tight. You don't want me to answer that. Her gaze didn't waver. Maybe I do. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier. My hands curled into fists against my knees to keep from moving. Outside, a car drove past, the sound fading quick. The clock ticked twice in the hallway. You're married, I said finally, the words tasting bitter. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. You think I forgot? That was it. The last thin thread holding the moment together frayed. I could feel it, the way her breath slowed, the way mine matched it. We didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared, the weight of what might happen next pressing down on both of us. Her lips parted, just barely. So, what now? The question hung in the air like a match over gasoline. Her question, what now? Still hung between us when her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't look at the screen right away. She just kept her eyes on me, like she could will me to say something first. When she finally picked it up, her face shifted, not with fear, but with something sharper. It's not him, she said, her tone unreadable. Then who? She turned the phone so I could see the text. Just a name I didn't recognize and 5 words. He knows you're with him. My mouth went dry. Who sent that? A friend, she said slowly, like she was still piecing it together herself. Someone who owes me the truth. The air in the room changed. What had felt like a private, suspended moment now felt exposed. Like the walls weren't keeping anything in anymore. I sat back, trying to process. You told someone I was here? Her brows pulled together. No. Which means someone saw you come in. For the first time since I'd arrived, she looked uncertain. Not about me, but about whatever this meant. Why would it matter that much? I asked, my voice lower now. She hesitated, then leaned back, almost like she was bracing herself. Because before he was my husband, he was your father's business partner. It was like the room tilted. I hadn't heard his name in years, but instantly I was back in that cramped kitchen, listening to my father curse about the man who took everything and left nothing but the scraps. You. My voice cracked, and I had to start again. You knew? I didn't know you were his son when you started working for us. She looked down, fingers tightening in the hem of her sweater. But when I did, I didn't tell him. My heart pounded. Why? She met my eyes again, steady now. Because I liked having you here. And because I wanted to see you for yourself, not through his stories. The confession cut through me in ways I didn't expect. The anger I should have felt tangled with something else, something warmer, harder to fight. I ran a hand over my face, trying to think. If he finds out, he'll fire you, she finished. Then, after a pause, and it won't stop there. Her words landed heavy. We both knew what she meant, that this wasn't just about a job. It was about loyalty, about old grudges that could ruin more than either of us had planned. But even with that hanging over us, I couldn't ignore how close she was sitting now. Her voice softened. I need you to decide if you're staying or leaving, before I decide for you. She didn't move. Didn't look away. And in that moment, I wasn't sure which choice would be the bigger mistake. I didn't answer her right away. The words sat heavy in my chest, pressing against my ribs. Staying or leaving? I repeated, like maybe saying it out loud would make it clearer. She leaned back against the couch, her eyes still locked on mine. You don't get both. The part of me that wanted to play it safe said I should stand up, grab my bag, and walk out before her husband's car pulled into the driveway or that text reached the wrong hands. But the other part, the one that had been here since the second she opened the door, didn't want to move at all. You want me to leave? I asked. She hesitated. The pause was longer this time, deeper. I want you to tell me why you came in the first place. I swallowed. Because I didn't want to just imagine you anymore. Her eyes softened, and for a second, the air between us was almost too much to breathe. That's dangerous, she murmured. Yeah, I said. I know. She shifted closer, slow enough that I could stop her if I wanted to. I didn't. Do you think this is going to end well? No, I said. But that doesn't mean I don't want it. The confession hung there, raw and unpolished. She didn't smile, didn't blush, she just looked at me like she was memorizing my face. Then her hand reached for mine, hesitated, and finally settled over it. Her skin was warm, her grip light, but it was the way her thumb brushed over my knuckles, like she was testing the edge of something fragile, that made my chest ache. We can't take it back if we cross this line, she said quietly. I don't want to take it back, I replied. Her breathing changed, a little quicker, a little heavier. She leaned in until her forehead almost touched mine, and I could feel the warmth of her breath on my lips. But then she stopped, pulling in a sharp inhale, like she was dragging herself back from the edge. I don't want to hurt you, she whispered. You already did, I said. The second you opened the door. Her eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened again, something in them had shifted, not softer, but steadier. She slid her hand from mine, but didn't move away. "I'm not asking you to stay forever," she said. "Just stay tonight." It wasn't a plea. It wasn't even a question. I should have asked what that meant, should have thought about the fallout, should have remembered the text and the husband and the history between our families. But all I could do was nod. And in that nod was every answer she needed. I stayed. Not because it was easy, it wasn't, but because leaving would have been worse. The rest of the night unfolded in fragments. We talked more than we touched, and when we did touch, it was careful, almost reverent. She told me things she'd never said to her husband, about the years before they met, the dreams she'd let go of, the way she hated feeling invisible in her own home. I told her about my father, about the bitterness he'd carried like a shadow, about how I swore I wouldn't inherit it. She listened without interrupting, except to ask questions that dug deeper than I expected. The truth was, we weren't just breaking a line, we were rewriting it. At some point, her phone lit up again. She didn't pick it up. She didn't even look at it. And for the first time that night, I realized this wasn't about who might find out. It was about her choosing something for herself. When the first light of morning filtered through the curtains, she was sitting beside me on the couch, her legs tucked under her, hair falling in soft waves around her face. "You'll have to leave before he gets back," she said quietly. "I know." Her hand found mine again, fingers lacing without hesitation. "But that doesn't mean this is over." It should have sounded like a warning, but it felt like a promise. By the time I walked out her door, the world outside looked the same street, the same air, the same sound of someone's dog barking down the block, but nothing inside me was untouched. We didn't pretend to know where it was going. Maybe we'd see each other again in a week, maybe not for months. But I knew I'd think about her every time I passed that street, every time I smelled coffee and cedar, every time I caught myself looking for a sweater slipping off someone's shoulder. And I knew she'd think of me. Maybe when she heard a knock at the door, maybe when she tightened a bolt on a shelf I built, maybe when she remembered what it felt like to be wanted without conditions. Some things don't need a label to matter. Some connections aren't measured by the rules they break, but by the space they leave behind when they're gone. If there's anything I learned from her, it's that the right moments don't wait for the right circumstances. You either take them, or you watch them disappear. And I've watched enough disappear to know, I'm not letting this one go. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?